There we go. There we go. It didn't take 20 seconds to start this time. So we're on time, just like always, never late. It's been a week. So like always, how you been? Welcome back. How you been?
I'm chilling, man. You know, the Pittsburgh Steelers just got their best win of the season, so I'm on a high right now. I'm on a high.
I was on a very low. I was telling John that I was watching the Pistons Rockets game, and if the game was looking real good, we would have to start late. But then the game was looking real bad, so we here on time. But saw a nice little highlight, so I'm happy. I'm here. I'm in good spirits right now. But we here, as everyone knows, for the power forwards list on our weekly top 10 at each position. So we got our top 10 power forwards today. This is the list I think most people are waiting for.
Yeah,
this is the one that everyone's excited for. You got the LeBron fans, the Kevin Durant fans, the Giannis fans, the Tatum fans. They're all here congregating to see that their guy is the one who's being hated on today. So this is definitely going to be the most controversial one today. I'd be lying if I said I'm looking forward to it, because I know the comments will be like, you don't know ball. How can you say this guy's bad?
I'm already knowing.
So I've already accepted that. I'm fine with that. We got a couple NBA games actually going on as we're recording this, with the Bucks and the Celtics and the Pistons and the Rockets. The Bucks are up 1 as I'm currently speaking. But I want to start today's show addressing a super chat that came through last week. It came through right as I ended the show. And obviously, if you're going to send money to the show, I'm going to make sure I get to your chat. So it may be a week late, but hopefully Kevo 2 times is here, so I can say that I did read his super chat. He did ask last week, if Wemby becomes the GOAT defender, what level offensive player does he need to be the greatest player of all time? I'm gonna ask you, John, what level of offensive player does Wemby have to be if he is the best defender in history?
If he's the best defender in history, I would still expect him to be an above average offensive player, just because we've seen a lot of people who are consensus top 10 basketball players still play at a high level offensively. Michael Jordan is one of the better defenders of all time. LeBron, Hakeem Olajuwon, Tim Duncan, Shaquille O'Neal. He would still have to play at an above average offensively for him to be in that GOAT conversation. But once again, it's year two. It's year two. He still has a far way to go, but he has the tools. He has the tools to be the greatest defender of all time, and he has the tools to get to that area to where it's just really hard to stop him. We see a lot of players that are legends in the game go to something routinely when the game is close or when they just need to get in rhythm. And I think once Wemby finds that, he's going to be very hard to stop, because he already has the tools. He's 7'4". He's going to be able to get to the rim. He's been working on outside three, whether it's step backs, motion shooting. And he's been saying that that's part of his development process that the Spurs have put him through. So if he were to come down and be a above league average shooter on top of being so dominant down low, he definitely has a chance to be at that level that we're referring to.
I think the simple way is the current, in my opinion, best defender of the modern era is Hakeem. But I don't think, I'm pretty confident he's not the greatest player ever. So I would say he probably has to be a better offensive player than Hakeem in order to be the greatest player ever. Now, how much better and how is he better? Is he a better scorer? Is he a better playmaker? However he does it, I don't know. But that's the level he would have to be above in order for him to be in the conversation for the greatest player ever, in my estimation. So thank you, Kevo, 2 times for the super chat. Hopefully you watch this whether you're live or after the fact, and you know that we did get to a super chat. But we are here for the top 10 power forwards in the NBA. And like always, we do start with our honorable mentions. So, John, do you have any honorable mentions you would like to start with?
All right, so I just want to share a little light to this player. He's probably not 11 or 12 on my power forward list, but since his team is on such a hot start, I think I just would like to talk about him for a little bit, and that's Draymond Green, who is still one of the smartest defenders in the entire NBA. Just the way that he recognizes plays, the ways he uses his hands, the way he's able to guard in the pick and roll, the way he's able to guard in the post. It's just, he's such an engine. He's such an anchor for this Golden State Warriors team. And we saw the effectiveness he had when he was not playing last season. Last season, he was still an 80th percentile post-up defender and an 88th percentile pick and roll defender. And some would say one of his down seasons as a defender. I still think Draymond Green is one of the most impactful defensive players in the NBA. And I would still have him in my top 10 defenders as of right now, spoiler alert. But the way he impacts the Golden State Warriors and the way the Golden State Warriors have performed so far this season. With Draymond Green still being so dominant defensively, I just would want to talk about him. Now, his age is still showing. I don't think he's the best rim protector as he once was, and his movement isn't as fluid as it used to be, but I still think he's a phenomenal defender, and I think his impact needs to be mentioned in this list.
Yeah, Draymond was another one who I had as honorable mention. I just didn't know what to do with him. I do think defensively, he is still he's a monster on that end. I still think defensively, definitely one of the smartest defenders in the NBA still. Definitely, I think, in my opinion, the best defender of the last 15 or so years. That might be a hot take. I don't know. Maybe I'm giving him too much credit. But I still think now he's still great. IQ off the charts, switchability, roaming, fantastic. I think what has declined the most is some motor issues in terms of just how consistently he's able to level it up, and also just the rim protection and the ability to alter shots and play the full-time five, things that I think he lags behind him, but still an elite defender. I just didn't know what to do with him offensively, and how do I view him compared to the other guys who I think are also elite defenders, but I do think provide more offensive value at this time. How teams are still able to play off of him, how much of his value is derived off who he plays next to. How does that look outside of his current situation offensively? Defensively, there's no question of how good he is, but offensively, I think there are just still some pieces to that puzzle that I think are missing, which has ultimately led to me leaving him off. But he was a tough cut for me because defensively, I do think he is still one of the very best on that end, but ultimately just couldn't make the cut for me. So we do seem to be on the same page of our honorable mention. But I am curious to know, who do you have at number 10? Where do you start this list?
Okay, so at number 10, I have Evan Mobley, who has had a really big question mark next to his offensive game over the past few seasons. And with the new addition for the Cleveland Cavaliers, their head coach, Kenny Atkinson, it looks like he has evolved in some ways offensively. He has tried some new things that we haven't seen him do in the past few years. I'm just really happy that he didn't stick Evan Mobley in the corner and just hopefully his jump shots just starts falling out of nowhere. He's actually putting Evan Mobley in actions with inverted pick and rolls. He's getting the ball from off the rebound and just running straight in transition. I think he is 1.34 points per possession in transition, which is top 30 in the NBA. And adding all of this offensive upside and offensive improvement that we have seen this season, he is still one of the best defenders in the NBA. Over the playoffs last season, I think he had a great job against Jayson Tatum. I think he did a great job in his possessions against Paolo Banchero. I think he's very switchable. I think he's very versatile. I think he guards the pick and roll amazingly well. He's a 95th percentile pick and roll defender. It's just the offensive upside, I don't think, is as high as it would be for some of the guys I have ahead of him. So while he is still one of the best defenders in the league, I think we would have to see a little bit of a step up, or a little bit more of a step up offensively for me to move him up in this list. So as of right now, he would be at number 10.
I can't say I'm surprised about Evan Mobley at 10, but I will say I had Evan Mobley at 6. So there is a large discrepancy there. I guess this is what Multi-Kenny was here for. He sent a super chat saying we need more arguments, too much agreeing going on. If you're on the screen, you have to yell and scream at each other or else it's a bad show. Now, we're definitely not going to yell and scream, but there is a disagreement here. I have Evan Mobley at 6. So I think maybe there might be some, I guess, bias to what I've seen this season offensively, in terms of just how he's being utilized. I'm seeing the ball in his hands more, how great he is as a cutter. You alluded to how good he is in transition. But I think Kenny Atkinson has really unlocked his offensive game, and also his self-development has been great. He's never going to be an advantage creator on the ball. That's never going to be who he is. But I do think, just in terms of just an overall philosophy of basketball, I think we do tend to overvalue the offensive players as opposed to like the defensive monsters. Now, I think advantage creation is extremely valuable, especially when we're talking about offensive players. But I also think being able to remove advantages on defense is just as valuable or close to it. So even though I don't think Evan Mobley is an elite advantage creator, I do think he's able to take away advantages that offenses can create on the Cleveland Cavaliers, which provides close to as much value as someone who is an advantage creator for their offense. And then you pair that alongside the value I do think he's providing offensively this year as a pick and roller, as a cutter, as a transition weapon, as that extra passer he does provide as a big in terms of the playmaking, the high-low action, all of those things. I do think he is a good enough offensive piece, not a weapon, but a piece that he's definitely better than a guy like Draymond Green for me, but he does elevate to number 6 on the list. But I think I have to speak more about his defensive versatility, just the value he brings on that side, because that's what has elevated him to the level I have him at. He is one of the best rim protectors in the NBA, in my opinion. Whether that be help side rim protection, primary rim protection, his recovery speeds, all of those things are fantastic for a guy 6'11", 7 feet. He is maybe the most mobile 7-footer in the league. I'm struggling to think of someone who's 7 feet who's as mobile as he is, especially defensively. His body control is fantastic. Like I said, his recovery tools are amazing. His timing is fantastic. His ability to block shots with either hand, so he's not just a right hand dominant shot blocker. So if he misses it with his right hand, he can get it with his left. All of those things are fantastic. The sphere of influence he has defensively, in terms of how many shots he can alter and what he can really get to, is only really outmatched by, I think, Wemby. But Wemby's just he's a different animal. But in terms of all of those things, and then his ability to play in the pick and roll, whether that's drop, switching, hedging, playing 2 in the pick and roll, all of those things are amazing. I've always said I think he's the second most switchable big in the NBA. Only Bam Adebayo, I think, surpasses him. But defensively, I don't really see any weaknesses. You alluded to what he was able to do to Paolo in the postseason, and spoiler alert, I think Paolo's going to show up on this list. He was an elite Paolo defender last year in the postseason. Fantastic, able to contain him one-on-one, force Paolo into tough jump shots, taking away the rim completely from Paolo and other Orlando Magic players. Now, Paolo was able to still score, and we're going to get to him and how great he is. But Evan Mobley being that good, and then you look at that Celtics series where he was primarily guarding Jayson Tatum, but he was also being responsible for guarding the rim. And Boston with their 5 out, it's very difficult to do that, but Evan Mobley held his own, and that's where you really start to saw his offensive game really start to emerge when he was using him in that delay 5 out where the spacing was optimal and he was able to attack downhill and all of those things. So maybe I'm jumping the gun a little bit on Evan Mobley, and maybe the offense is going to regress a little bit. And I'm fine with that possibly being the case, but I'm going to stand on Evan Mobley at 6 for me. Couldn't really consider him much higher, definitely considered him lower, but I ultimately went on the side of optimism and went with Evan Mobley at number 6. But we do have a big discrepancy there, 10 and 6. Yes, so I'm curious to know, who do you have at number 9?
At number 9, I have Paolo Banchero. This is where we have Paolo Banchero on the list. Last year, he was giving you, I think, about 22-7 and 22-9 and 5. If I don't believe I don't have the numbers right in front of me. But we saw Paolo Banchero kind of give the defense a lot of breaks over the regular season, whether it was pulling up for mid-range jumpers or post fades. And when you really look at how he plays and how the Orlando Magic play, this is a team that is predicated off defense. And this is a team that cannot space the floor as well. And it almost always takes up a lot of space in the paint for Paolo Banchero to really be effective. But this season, we saw Paolo Banchero get downhill a lot more before the injury. Last season, Paolo Banchero was taking about 22% of his shots in the restricted area, and 25% came from three-pointers. So this was a guy who relied on the tough shot making a lot, relied on the 3-ball a lot. He has shown signs as a playmaker. I would like to see his turnovers go down a little bit. I would like to see him get better from the free throw line, since he's going to be somebody that's going to be playing through contact so much. But this season, he's just been really dominating, using his gifts and his advantages against the defense while getting downhill and having to force double teams, and him being able to find guys in the corner or find guys cutting to the basket. I think he's gotten better at that as well. And I think he's a solid defender. I don't think he's going to be ever going to be any all defensive level type of player, but I do think he can play gaps well. I think he could be a solid help side rim protector. And I think he could take some on-ball responsibilities if given. But this Orlando Magic team with Franz Wagner, Jalen Suggs, KCP, Jonathan Isaac, he's not going to need to do that as often. So I'm really high on Paolo Banchero. It's just there are still some things that I would like to see him get better on before he improves on this list.
Yeah, I had Paolo at 8, and I really struggled with what to do with Paolo. Similar to Evan Mobley, the stuff I've seen this year has really been enticing to me and gave me more room for optimism with Paolo, in terms of being able to use his physical tools to his advantage and get downhill more consistently, and really just take advantage of smaller matchups and not settle for jumpers as much as he has in the past, which I think is a big part of his development. Getting to the free throw line at really, really great levels prior to his injury. Now it's unfortunate he got hurt. We would like to see how that continued to develop and how consistent it would have been. But from what I saw early on in the season, there was room to be optimistic. He was taking about 12 free throws a game, which is amazing. Now converting on them, a whole nother conversation, but getting there, I think, is the start of the next step of development for Paolo. Offensively, he goes back to my point of advantage creation on offense versus the guy who takes away advantages on defense and Evan Mobley. I do think Paolo was someone who did create a lot of advantages for Orlando. Probably most of them, him and Franz shared that responsibility, but Paolo is probably like 70% of their advantage creation.
Yeah.
But the issue I had with Paolo was him settling out of that. He could make good reads as a playmaker, was a bit turnover prone last year, has really cut down on that this year. But the settling for jump shots, which just weren't wins for his team, is where I had the problem. He shot about 39% from mid-range last year, which wasn't great. And then he had the playoff run against Cleveland where he shot about 47% from mid-range, which is not something that I would view as sustainable shot making for someone who hasn't really shown that to me in a large sample of games. So that settling and then not being able to really put the defense in constant rotation is why I don't ultimately hold Paolo's offense over someone like Evan Mobley's defense and offensive combination. But I do think Paolo has shown growth defensively. Someone who's shown the ability to rotate over on the weak side, alter some shots, use his size, use his physicality. Now, he's never going to be a point of attack stopper. That's just not him. He doesn't have the lateral movement. He's a bit too heavy-footed. That's fine. But if he's able to provide strong value on an elite Orlando defense and be their sole advantage creation and keep developing as a passer and shooter and use his physical tools, he could definitely climb up this list. I had him at 8, but I could definitely see a world in which he can climb closer and closer to the top 5. But I did ultimately settle on Paolo at 8, which is ultimately higher than you. So you are the Paolo hater, not me. You are the Paolo hater. Yeah, so you got to lock in, man. I don't know why you would hate on my guy Paolo like that.
Yeah, man.
But enough on Paolo. Who is your number 8? Who is your number 8?
At number 8, I have Pascal Siakam, and this is where I would say that the polish on these guys offensively, I have coming up would kind of outrank the polish of Evan Mobley and Paolo Banchero offensively. And I think Pascal Siakam has a multitude of ways to be an offensive weapon for a team. He's great in transition. He's great in the post. He's just great in the mid-range in general. And this is a guy who is such a mismatch creator for the defense. You can't put a center on him because he's too quick to be guarded by some centers. And he is really good in the post to where you can't really put any wings on him as well, with his spin moving, with his shot creation down low, with his face-up game. Last season, he averaged about 22 points per game, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, 60% true shooting, 42% in the mid-range, 45% on corner threes. And he's really not going to overpower you in the post. He's not going to overpower you in the post. It's his footwork, his spin moves, his face-up game. I think that is very, very valuable. I think him being on the Pacers makes it just as dangerous as well with his transition game, and that being how the Indiana Pacers generate their offense. I think he's great off ball, and I think he's a great screen setter. He's great in the pick and roll. I think he's great in the pull-up mid-range game. So that is what would outrank him to Paolo Banchero, in my opinion, would just be the polish offensively.
I'm very curious how these lists look, because I didn't have Pascal Siakam on my list. I didn't have Pascal Siakam in my top 10. He was someone who obviously I considered, but I ultimately didn't go with him because it goes back to my advantage creation point. And then defensively, I think the steady decline that has happened from Pascal Siakam from, I guess, the championship year to then he got given the keys in Toronto to then he get moved to Indiana. It's just been a steady decline defensively, in my opinion. The effort has been less consistent. He hasn't moved as well on the perimeter. That versatility that he used to provide wasn't really there. All of those things that I thought made him such a great two-way weapon have kind of just disappeared. And now he's a one-way, really good, really polished offensive player, like you said. But I don't think he's an advantage creator like a Paolo Banchero is. And I don't think he takes anything away defensively. In fact, I think he gives up more than he takes away. So my issues with Pascal Siakam were he's more of not a play finisher, but someone who isn't really pressuring defenses. He is a great mid-range shot maker. He is a capable spot-up shooter. He is still really good in transition, being able to attack a slanted defense. All of those things are really valuable, but I don't think he's the best in the league at the power forward position. And I think defensively, he leaves so much to be desired at this point that I ultimately didn't go with him on the list, which is maybe why I should have just said honorable mention Pascal Siakam, but I didn't know you was going to have him on the list. So this is the time to talk about Pascal Siakam. So that works. But yeah, for me, Pascal didn't make the list. If I was going to put him, I would have had him at 10. But he was battling with Draymond, one other person, and then him for that 10 spot, I ultimately sided with the person I have at 10, who I'm starting to believe you didn't have on the list. So I'm going to wait a few more spots to see if you do end up having him on the list, but I'm starting to think you don't. But yeah, Pascal for me just wasn't able to make the list just for those reasons. I don't think he is offensively capable enough to really pressure defenses. And then defensively, I think I'm at the point where I'm close to saying Pascal Siakam is more negative than he is positive at this point on defense. So that was why I would ultimately not have him on the list, but I definitely can see having him at 8. Not sure about having him over Paolo, but definitely can see it. But ultimately not enough for me to have him on the list. But I am now curious to know who you have at number 7.
At number 7, I have Lauri Markkanen. And I think Lauri Markkanen is one of the more underrated superstars in the NBA just because he's in a really bad situation. But when we really look at a guy like Lauri Markkanen, who is 7 foot tall and moves so fluidly off the ball, and he creates so much advantages for himself and for the offense, just moving off ball and constantly finding the perfect spot to get his shot off. He's great in motion threes. He's extremely efficient. And a lot of people say that he can't put the ball on the floor. I think he's a solid ball creator. He's not the best. I wouldn't say he's a better creator with the ball in his hand than Pascal Siakam, but the portability with Lauri Markkanen and the way he is able to improve every single team in the NBA just off of his off-ball ability and his shooting ability, I think is just extremely valuable. This is a guy that is an ultimate ceiling raiser offensively for any team he goes to. And I think it doesn't get talked about enough because he's in Utah and he doesn't really have that above average creator next to him to where he can truly get his shots off. But I think any team in the league would love to have a guy like Lauri Markkanen, especially with how 3-point and perimeter centric the NBA is. And last season, he shot 41% on catch and shoot threes, 42% on catch and shoot twos. He's just a really efficient guy. He's 42% from the mid-range, 70% in the restricted area, 39% on above the break threes. The portability, the off-ball movement, the way to attack closeouts, post fadeaways, post game. I think he's really good. I think he's really good, and I think he's very underrated.
I agree with him being underrated, but I'm not gonna lie, I'm really confused about. I'm gonna have to ask you about some certain players because we're running out of spots. So I had Lauri Markkanen was my number 10. It was between him and Pascal Siakam, like I alluded to, because neither one of them are advantage creators on the ball. But I do think Lauri Markkanen is the most dangerous off-ball player in the NBA, not named Steph Curry. I think his movement is constant. The pressure he puts on the rim and the perimeter at 7 feet, being able to play back doors, being able to curl off screens, all of those things just make him an exceptional off-ball weapon. I actually think his passing is starting to improve year on year, which is really nice. He's never going to be a primary playmaker because the handle isn't extremely functional. But just being able to make those reads when he does get overplayed, I do think is another level of his development. I think defensively, I actually think he's a better defender than Pascal Siakam at this moment in time, which is saying a lot because I think Lauri Markkanen at best is probably a neutral defender. But just ultimately being the utility, the portability, like you alluded to as an offensive piece, was enough for me to get him in at number 10. But I couldn't really see myself getting him a lot higher without ultimately being really low on the people I had above him. But hearing you have Lauri Markkanen at 7 and Pascal at 8, I feel like I have to ask, where do you have Julius Randle?
He is number 11.
Okay, so Julius Randle was not someone you had on the list. Okay, because he was someone I was waiting, and then you were getting higher and higher, and I was like, well, I think I know what the top 5 is going to be. So I don't think he's going to be there. But then I was like, there's only one more spot. So I was really curious about where you would have Julius Randle. So I feel like, I mean, why not? Let's get into Julius Randle a little bit. I feel like we can do a little comparison between Julius Randle and Lauri Markkanen. But you have Julius Randle at 11. What was it that led to you keeping him off the list?
I think Julius Randle, it's such a roller coaster type of event for Julius Randle, to where there are days where the shot is falling. I still think his shot choice is very questionable. And when you get a guy who settles for mid-range shots like he does, or settles for contested threes like he does, we get a lot of roller coaster efficiency seasons where there are some years where he's shooting the ball very well and there's some days where he's just shooting the ball very poorly. I do not think he is the best defender. Like, I wouldn't consider him over Evan Mobley, wouldn't consider him over Paolo. He is a solid playmaker, but I just don't think that Julius Randle has the portability that a guy like Pascal Siakam or Lauri Markkanen can, and that would really deter me from having him on this top 10 list.
Okay, so because I also had Julius Randle was like my toughest cut. I wanted to give Draymond Green some love, but I thought you was going to have Julius Randle on the list, so I was saving him. But if I would have known you didn't have him on the list, we would have spoke about him in the honorable mention section.
That's
so
why I didn't talk about him. Yeah,
we are kind of all over the place a little bit here with the order. But I did have Julius Randle right outside the top 10. I ended up settling with Lauri Markkanen at 10, and Julius Randle was probably my toughest cut at 11 or 12. I don't know. Pascal Siakam was probably right below Draymond and Julius Randle. My concern with Julius Randle, I mean, I've aired them out quite a lot. But I think this season he has played away from those concerns. Definitely not taking as many tough mid-range jump shots as he was in New York, which is a great sign to see. Definitely working to get himself easier looks in and around the rim, in and around the paint. Now, does he still rely on some tough shot making? Yes, absolutely. But that's just his game. I'm not going to ask him to change his game completely. But him being able to just use his physicality, get within 8 feet of the rim and then make tough floaters, make finishes around the basket instead of taking 14-foot jump shots is a sign of growth. The passing and the playmaking is still there. His physicality does draw double teams and kickouts and all those things. So I do think as an on-ball creator, he is better than a guy like Lauri Markkanen. He is better than a guy like Evan Mobley, of course. But I just think the value of on-ball creation when I don't think you are an offensive engine is what ultimately leads me to being lower on Julius Randle. I think his value away from the ball, his value when the offense isn't running through him, I do think is something that ultimately leads me to being lower on him than I guess the consensus. But we both seem to have him at right outside the top 10. So we seem to be on the same page. But the consensus having Julius Randle probably would have him in the top 10. So I do think that people might not agree with that, but that's just my thoughts on Julius Randle. But I have liked what I've seen this year. Now, the defensive effort and intensity has been still inconsistent, but I feel like that's just what you're going to get with Julius Randle. But just overall, not enough for me to get him in the top 10, despite the fact I do think he is probably a better on-ball creator than a few guys I actually have on my list. But I do think there's just more to it than just offensive creation and offensive leading, offensive initiation. Yeah, offensive initiation. So, Lauri Markkanen was my 10. Julius Randle was right outside. That's something I've said quite a few times before. I don't think this is the first time you've heard it from me. But yes, Kai's Lauri Markkanen over Randle is definitely what I'm going with.
Yeah, 100%.
But on to your number 6. We're on number 6, I believe.
Yes, we are.
So right after Lauri Markkanen, who do you have?
At number 6, I have Zion Williamson, who I'm still holding out hope for. We've seen Zion Williamson get hurt a lot. He hasn't had any playoff experience, but last season he was giving us about 23 points per game, 6 rebounds, 5 assists per game. And I don't think it's talked about enough how crafty he is around the rim, just being able to finish over 2 guys, being able to finish on any spot on the backboard, being able to have that high level of touch that he has around the basket. I really liked what I saw from him as a playmaker, being able to play or to play make out of the pick and roll, being able to be a roll man in the pick and roll. He's great in transition. He's always been a lob threat. And part of me still thinks that if you just put the right team around him, he can be the number 1 on a Western Conference Finals team or a team that just makes a deep run in the playoffs. And this is the type of guy who's going to consistently create rim pressure, and he has made strides as a playmaker to be able to kick the ball out to guys like Trey Murphy or Herb Jones or CJ McCollum. And I think having the athletic big next to him that can catch lobs, be in the pick and roll with him, I just think the team around him could be better, and I think he could be an offensive focal point to take a team to a deep playoff run. But we always talk about Zion Williamson's injuries and how that holds him back. But outside of that, I still think he's probably one of the best downhill players in the NBA, period. I think he finished around the rim exceptionally well. I think the playmaking is only going to get better the way he's able to create out in the pick and roll, pass out of drives, driving kicks. He's really good. And I just think right now the New Orleans Pelicans they have a lot of talent, but they don't really have the roster that fits around Zion perfectly. And I think that's what's holding him back from the consensus, because I still think he is a phenomenal player.
So Zion Williamson at 6 is definitely, when I've initially made the list, I had Zion at 6. I ultimately ended up moving him down to 7 because Evan Mobley is my number 6. Okay. I know we just heard Zion is injured. He's going to be out for a few weeks with a hamstring strain. So, I mean, we are obviously doing these lists assuming health for everyone. But Zion, when healthy, monstrous downhill threat. I want to say he might be the best rim finisher in the league. And if he's not, he's in the top 3. I want to say that.
I don't hate it at all.
Just his touch, the dexterity is not there, but the touch is there. Absolutely. A bit like you said, finish off any angle of the glass, being able to make tough flip shots. Like people, like everyone remembers the high school mixtapes of Zion and everything, but he's finishing with layups way more than he's finishing with dunks. Like practically all of his half court finishes end up being tough finishes, layups, and around contact, around 2 or 3 defenders. And he's able to absorb contact and still finish. He's able to float around defenders. That level of agility and strength at 6'6" is just not something we've ever seen before. His ability to get downhill from the outside is great. His ability to roll to the rim as a screener, playing the dunker spot, cut, all of those things. Anything in terms of getting to the rim, he's fantastic. Now, I'm not as high on the playmaking jump, so to say, for Zion Williamson. That ultimately has me lower on his offensive ceiling. I do think it's pretty one-dimensional in the way he approaches the game. I think defensively, not only has he been disappointing, he's just not very impactful on that side of the ball, taking way too many plays off, not being a consistent presence at the rim, not being a great rebounder, not being a great defensive playmaker. Just so many holes defensively for someone with his physicality and his athleticism. Is kind of disappointing that he could be so much more defensively. But offensively, I just think when you're that much of an advantage creator, you put that much pressure on the rim, you're consistently pressuring defenses and collapsing defenses. That level of advantage creation was too much to look past, which is why I had him above Paolo, because I do think the pressure he puts downhill, the physical imposition that he possesses, is more impactful than Paolo, who I think is the better shot maker. Probably is the better passer at this point, but just the pressure that Zion is putting on defenses is something that you can't really replicate. The only person who can replicate is probably going to be the person we both have at number 1. So I think that's what makes Zion so special. I ultimately had him at 7 just because I think the value that Evan Mobley's providing on both sides of the ball is enough for me to say I would have him over Zion. But as an offensive engine, I think Zion is the best player I've named so far. But obviously, if we were factoring in health, he'd probably be even lower because still unable to stay healthy, unfortunately. Hopefully he can come back. Everyone's clowning Tobias Harris, but we all happy over here, man. Shout out to the Rockets squeaking out that win, winning by 2 ultimately. But yeah, Zion Williamson, my number 7, your number 6. But I think we've gone a half an hour through, and I think everyone here was like, yeah, I mean the 10 through 6 is cool, but they're here for the top 5. Yeah, that's what everyone's here for. Everyone wants to hear the top 5. I want to hear the top 5 because we've already had some disagreements in terms of where we're ranking guys 10 through 6. So I'm very curious about who you have in this top 5. But before we get into that, 2 of these guys are playing each other right now in Giannis and Jayson Tatum. Spoiler alert. Giannis has had overall a very good game. The Celtics are tied with the Bucks right now, 95-95, and Giannis is, I believe, going to the free throw line. So we'll see if the Bucks take the lead and who wins. Jayson Tatum is 5 for 16 as we speak. So let's not let this game skew our perspectives and move Jayson Tatum down or move Giannis up or whatever the case may be. But they are playing against each other right now as we are recording this. If you're watching this after the fact, also like the video, all of those things. But
like the video,
yeah, like the video for sure. But who do you have at number 5?
At number 5, I have Kawhi Leonard, another guy who a lot of people seem to not realize how good he still is due to the fact that he has been injured. Now, last season, I think he played 65 plus games, if I believe so, and he averaged about 24 points per game, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, 50, 42, 88 splits on 62% true shooting. And this is a guy who can still score from many different scenarios. And he's just extremely efficient. He's a 93rd percentile isolation creator, 88th percentile pick and roll creator, 77th percentile spot up player, and a 72nd percentile post up player. Even defensively, he's an 85th percentile post defender. He's extremely strong. He can get to his spots. He's super efficient in the mid range. He was 43% on catch and shoot threes, 43% on catch and shoot twos, 39% on pull up threes, and 48% on pull up twos. And last season, Over the stretch of December to February, Kawhi was giving you 25 points per game, 4 assists, 6 rebounds on 56, 47, 92 splits, and 66% true shooting. This guy is still a superstar. And if the power forward position was not so stacked, I think he would be a lot higher on this list. But the next 4 guys are top 10 in the league, honestly. So it's like, it's hard to really gauge it, but he's still an extremely effective perimeter defender, and I think he deserves more respect. I really do.
I agree with him needing to deserve more respect, which is why I had him at 4. So yeah, I think I think Kawhi Leonard is great. Obviously the injuries are the biggest concern. Is he available? When is he available? Blah blah blah. That's great. Whatever. When Kawhi Leonard is available, I think he is the 4th best power forward in the NBA. I think he, like you alluded to, he can score from anywhere, whether that's spot up threes, whether that's one dribble pull-ups, whether that's post-ups, whether that's just probing and getting to the free throw line, whether that's getting to the rim and finishing, using his strength, being able to just get to whatever spot on the floor he's comfortable with, where everywhere seems to be where he's comfortable from. Just being able to put all of that together while being an improved playmaker and passer, showing strides as a pick and roll decision maker, playmaking out of the double team, playmaking out of the post. Also, he's pretty much exclusively a half-court scorer, which is something I do place value in. Just being able to, if you score a lot in transition, that's really valuable. But being able to score consistently and efficiently in the half court is something that I do put a lot of value in, because most of the game is in the half court, and especially once you get to late stages of the playoffs, or you get to close games, it's practically a half court game at that point. So Kawhi Leonard being as much of a half court player as he is extremely valuable to me. Last year, I want to make sure I got the numbers correct. Last year, he was a 50% mid-range shooter, 42% from 3, and 71% at the rim. There's nowhere he's not elite at. He's an 89% free throw shooter. He gets to the line pretty consistently. Defensively, especially as an isolation defender, he is still one of the best in the league, has some of the best hands in the NBA. Doesn't cause as much havoc defensively as he used to 6-7 years ago. But if he did, he would be number 1 on this list. No disrespect to whoever else is at number 1. But if he was still that guy, he would definitely be my number 1. But him being as good as he is defensively, as good as he is offensively, as great as he is in the half court, was enough for me to put him at number 4. The reason I couldn't get him much higher is I do feel offensively he does fall a step below the guys I have above him. And just in terms of consistency on defense, I do think the effort does wane from game to game, from quarter to quarter. You're not going to get the same engaged Kawhi Leonard that you would have got a few years ago. So ultimately, number 4 is where I settled. Could have considered him at 5, but could consider them as high as 2. Like these guys, 2 through 5, I'm not going to lie, I was flipping them.
Yeah,
I might change my list tomorrow. So this is the list as of today. November 10th. This is the list November 10th. Don't ask me on November 11th. The list might be very different. But for now, I've got Kawhi Leonard at number 4 as opposed to your number 5. So I want to know, who is your number 4?
At number 4, I have Kevin Durant. Last season, 27 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists on 63% true shooting. And I think the way that Kevin Durant just raises the ceiling offensively for any team that he's on, how efficient he is from anywhere on the court. I think this season he's been extremely good on defense with his help side rim protection. And against the Dallas Mavericks, the last game he played, he had a nice stop against Kyrie late in the game that I really liked. He's been the best offensive player for the Phoenix Suns since he showed up. He's gotten a lot better as a playmaker. And just to look at some of the efficiency numbers, he's 77% in the restricted area, 44% on catch and shoot threes, 60% on catch and shoot twos, 49% on pull up twos. There's just not an area on the floor where KD cannot be efficient from, and I think that's extremely valuable. How he could be a pick and pop player, how he could be a great isolation player. He finishes around the rim perfectly, and on top of that, at his age, he's able to be such a positive defender for the Phoenix Suns. I think that's extremely valuable. But once again, I think the same thing can be said about Kawhi. Same thing can be said about somebody else we have on this list. I just don't think the motor is as high as it once was to where I can put them over my top 2 guys. I don't think they can do it at a pace for 82 games the way my top 2 can. And that's what's really holding me back from putting them any higher.
Durant is another one who unfortunately just got hurt, having a great start to the season, and he will be out for a few weeks at the least. Hopefully he recovers well. It's another calf strain. We know what we heard last time about calf strain from Kevin Durant. So hopefully he doesn't come back too soon. Hopefully the Suns are fine without him. But he's had a great start to the season. And Kevin Durant was my number 2.
I can understand that.
Kevin Durant, for me, just as an offensive weapon, we spoke a little bit about Lauri Markkanen and what he provides. Now, imagine Lauri Markkanen just on super duper uber steroids with ball handling ability while being maybe the best mid-range scorer we've ever seen. There's not much I can say about Kevin Durant that hasn't been said already, as Jayson Tatum hits a big 3. I think Kevin Durant, especially, and maybe I am falling for the recency of the last 9 games or whatever the Suns have played this year. He's getting to the rim more. Once you have a set offense that is able to create some advantages that he used to be able to create by himself, 2012, 2014. Now you probably need an offense in place to create those downhill advantages, give him the gaps in the defense. But when those gaps are there, he's still able to attack them. He's still able to get to the rim and finish at an extremely high clip. He's still one of the best tough shot makers in the NBA. We've seen it in crunch time for the Suns this season. He's practically scored the most clutch points in the NBA this year. He's done it extremely efficiently. Anywhere on the floor is practically where he's comfortable. He was 74% of the rim last year. 74% is ridiculous. 51% from mid-range, 41% from 3. That's pull-up threes, catch and shoot threes, pull-up mid-range jumpers, getting to the rim in his own, scoring in transition, scoring in the half court, scoring in the post, shooting over smaller defenders. There's no way he can't score from. Now, the issue I have with Kevin Durant is obviously just in terms of decision-making, being able to leverage his scoring while creating offense for other people. I do think he's probably, of the top 5, I would argue he's probably the weakest in that department, probably. But I also think defensively, he's stepped up to a level that is better than I think people give him credit for, is what I'll say. I think he's been the Suns' best defender this year. They've had a really good defense. I think he's been the Suns' best defender since he's got there. They've had good defenses. Being able to be the rim protector he is, being able to be a switch ability as he is, being able to contain guards on switches, all of those things, extremely valuable. And then you have someone who is just a weapon in the half court from anywhere on the floor, literally. Kawhi has similar efficiency numbers, but then when you look at who's a better pull-up three-point shooter, is Kevin Durant. When you look at who's the better ball handler, is Kevin Durant. When you look at who's able to just more consistently get their own offense, is Kevin Durant. So I think Kevin Durant, for me, number 2, is definitely where I settled on. But once again, 2 through 5, it's real interchangeable for me. Yeah. So like, I'm not about to die on the hill of KD's better than this guy, because I could really be convinced that Kevin Durant is lower than this, and I could be convinced that maybe I'm looking at Kevin Durant more optimistically than most. But for me, that's a special offensive player to this day, and I think he is probably the most skilled scorer in NBA history. So Kevin Durant for me, number 2. For you, number 4. Now, number 2 and 3, I obviously know who you have at 2 and 3, but I don't know the order you're going to go with. So, at number 3, who do you have?
LeBron James. I have LeBron James at number 3 after coming off a season with 26 points per game, 7 rebounds, 7 assists per game, 7 rebounds per game, and 8 assists per game on 54, 41, 75 splits. Now, LeBron James is still one of the best at getting downhill in the NBA. He's great in the post. He's great in transition. And to be at his age and to still be able to raise a ceiling offensively with his IQ, with his pick and roll game, with his post game, with just getting downhill, and the way that JJ Redick has been using him this season to get him easier looks getting downhill, whether it's off screens and having AD control the ball a little bit more. I just think it's very valuable. I think he can get so much attention coming downhill to where he's just so good at making the next pass or finding the open man or putting his offense in the best predicament to be an above average offense, to where I think that is extremely valuable. And I think there's just the IQ that he brings to the game that could be a little bit more valuable to me, at least, just to be the decision maker and the playmaker. And he's also made some really impressive jumps to his three-point shooting. Last season, he shot about 41% from 3 on 5 attempts. This season, I think he's like 47. Now, small sample size, but 47% on about 6 attempts. I think that's really good. And we still see moments from LeBron where it's like, there's just times where it's like, what do you do? What do you do when the shot's consistently falling? It's a random game on a Thursday night where LeBron just has 7 threes and he has 43 points. And it just doesn't make sense to me at 40 years old how he could play that well. But ultimately, I think there are moments where LeBron just cannot give you everything he has offensively or defensively, especially not defensively, to which is what holds me back from putting him higher on this list. And that's the thing that essentially stopped me from putting all three of these guys higher on this list. Is I think my 1 and 2 can go harder for an 82% or an 82 game season than my 3 through 5 can, and that would really hold me back from putting them any higher.
Jayson Tatum just made a hell of a defensive play on Giannis. Number 3 is the first time we have the same person in the same spot on this whole list. I also went with LeBron at number 3. Obviously, I had Kevin Durant at 2, and you, spoiler alert, I'm gonna have Jayson Tatum at 2. Yeah. But LeBron for me, I struggle with guys like LeBron and Kevin Durant because they're so clearly not what they used to be.
Yeah.
But they are still so great. And then you end up, I feel like sometimes I end up overcorrecting, and it's like I end up holding them lower in comparison to the current players because I know how good they used to be when they're still pretty comparable to the guys of today, if not better than them. But because they've declined so much, it's like, oh, they're worse than this guy. It's like, no, they're just worse than what they used to be. So I've been battling with that internally with guys like LeBron and KD, and just how am I able to separate what I know of what they used to be to what they are now. LeBron has leveled up as a 3-point shooter. I think we're at a point where we can't say it's just he's getting lucky. Like he's not. I think we have a large enough sample that LeBron is just a really good 3-point shooter at this point in time. Is he going to shoot 47% for a whole season? No. But is he a 38, 39, 40% 3-point shooter at this point? Probably.
Yes.
That's just probably what he is at this point. That's extremely valuable. He is the oldest player in the NBA. Him being able to turn into a 40% 3-point shooter at 39, 40 years of age is extremely impressive. He is still one of the better rim finishers, one of the better drivers in the NBA. Now, the volume in which he's doing it is nothing compared to what he used to, but still is a very good driver, still very good getting downhill, using his physicality, using his strength. He's still stronger than most defenders. He's still faster than most defenders, which is crazy. But you can see that there are times where his lack of explosion, especially off of 2 feet, is apparent. Sometimes he's missing layups short, missing layups off the bottom of the rim, just unable to explode in traffic like he used to. But still a great finisher. 69% of the rim last year, and this is on really strong volume. 41% from 3, like we alluded to. The issue I have with LeBron is just the 3-level scoring capabilities, the 4-level scoring, whatever you want to call it, the versatility in terms of being able to get to a spot on the floor, anywhere on the floor, and be a serious threat is something that I think lacks behind. He was 38% from mid-range last year. Shot a pretty solid volume for someone who isn't as good in the mid-range as other people, while also not being the dangerous downhill threat that our number 1 is Giannis. Spoiler alert.
Spoiler.
So although he's become a much better shooter, I do think he loses value in that regard because teams still are going under LeBron James screens. Teams still are daring the jump shot. Now, is it a valid strategy? Probably not at this point because he's going to lace him. But when he's not collapsing the defense like he used to, when he's not constantly getting to the rim, Jayson Tatum just made another big shot. When he's not collapsing the defense like he used to, when he's not putting the defense in rotation like he used to, and he's not the shot maker that a guy like Kevin Durant is, that ultimately has me lower on him compared to KD, especially when defensively, I think Kevin Durant is just a better defender at this point. I think the consistent effort is there compared to LeBron. The switchability is more consistent. The rim protection is clearly there. All of those areas of defense that I think LeBron he's able to bring it together in spurts. He's able to make high leverage plays when he is dialed in. He can give you 4 or 5 minutes of elite defense that not many people, when LeBron James is fully dialed in, if you get 1 quarter of fully dialed in LeBron James, he can play like an all defensive caliber defender at 39, 40 years old. But over the course of a game, and then over the course of a week, and then over the course of a month and a season and a playoff series, those moments become few and far between, which is ultimately why I settled with him at 3. But I had him above guys like Kawhi and Jayson Tatum, who I had at 5, spoiler alert. Just because I think offensively, the IQ, the feel for the game, it doesn't go away with LeBron James with age. He still sees the floor better than probably anyone in the league, maybe Jokic, but he's a different animal, but sees the floor maybe better than anyone in the NBA, understands what coverages are being ran within a split second. If teams are disguising their coverages, he can recognize it. He understands where to be, what to do, who needs to be where, what shot he wants on any given possession. He understands all of those things. That's something that will never go away. LeBron will be 47, seeing the game at a level that no one else can really see it. So that level of IQ, that feel for offense, that mastery of offense is what gave me the the confidence to have LeBron at 3 above guys like Kawhi and Jayson Tatum. But for me, Kevin Durant was just I ultimately favored Kevin Durant because of the shot making, because of the half court scoring. That was enough for me. And then the defense for me to have Kevin Durant above LeBron. But you have Jayson Tatum at 2. So that's the biggest discrepancy with our top 5. You have him at 2. I have him at 5. So why did you go with Jayson Tatum at number 2?
I went with Jayson Tatum at 2 because I alluded to it earlier with my 3, 4, and 5. It's just I would value more the consistency of being able to be that above average defender throughout every single game. I think this season over the playoffs where he did not have the best scoring performance, I still think he was the most valuable player on that Boston Celtics team with the defense he was able to provide. And there were people saying Jaylen Brown may have been the most impactful defender because he guarded Luka. But I don't think people understand how valuable it was for Jayson Tatum to guard the big in that scenario to where you can limit as much Al Horford or Kristaps Porzingis possessions on Luka Doncic. And Jayson Tatum has the athleticism to guard a Daniel Gafford in a roll scenario or in a post scenario. So I think that gets underestimated a lot. I think his playmaking has taken a jump. Do I think he's an above average playmaker or decision maker? No, but I think he made the possible adjustments to his playmaking to where that is not a liability for the team anymore, and he can be the lead ball handler for a team like this. And I think this is the team that is perfectly built around him and his skill sets. Last season, I think it was 27 points per game. We would like to see him shoot better from the long ball line. Last year in the playoffs, he was just extremely inefficient. But outside of that, if you're just willing to look past the scoring, I think the value that he brings defensively and every other trait in the game is just extremely massive with his rebounding and the way he is in transition, the ball handling. I think all of that is very valuable. Last season, it was about 38% from 3 on 8 attempts. This season is about 37 on 12, which I think will go down, but I still think he's very valuable for what he brings.
I agree. Very valuable. Definitely very valuable. I'm gonna start with the positives, and then I'm gonna get into the things that gave me, I guess, more hesitation with Jayson Tatum. The positives, I think, defensively. A lot of people have this infatuation with on-ball defense being a point of attack stopper, being able you're gonna lock someone up in isolation. That's Jaylen Brown, that's Drew Holiday. Those type of defenders, those are the guys that get all the credit, all the flowers, and then you got like the shot blockers there. That's like the two areas of defense that are gonna get the most credit. Jayson Tatum is neither one of those things. So his defense just gets pushed to the wayside. Oh, yeah, he's a good defensive player. He's on a good defensive team. People weren't even calling Jayson Tatum a good defender until he did the things we just alluded to, where he was guarding Kevin Durant in that 2022 Brooklyn series. And everyone was like, oh my God, Jayson Tatum's a really good defender. It's because he was guarding in isolation, guarding one-on-one. But Jayson Tatum is an elite off-the-ball defender. And I know a lot of times people say, oh, this guy's elite off the ball, and then they won't even like get into what he's elite at. Like there's certain areas, but elite off-ball defenders don't mean you're elite at everything. But Jayson Tatum, damn near, is elite at everything off the ball, which is what makes him so special. He's very good in the middle of the floor, the most dangerous area on the floor. If the team's able to drive middle, collapse the paint from the middle of the floor, that's the most dangerous thing that one could possibly do. He takes away the middle of the floor better than, I think, maybe any wing in the league outside of like a Jimmy Butler. But even though Jimmy's probably, the motor's not there as consistently. So I'll probably say Jayson Tatum probably takes away the middle of the floor better than anyone. His passing lane defense is fantastic. His length, his ability to guard 2 on the weak side, fantastic. He's able to always make sure he has an eye on the ball, but also doesn't really get beat back door. Milwaukee have really folded in the last few minutes of this game. His ability to play 2, his ability to deflect passes, cause havoc on the weak side, all extremely valuable traits. And then obviously you got just the versatility. I think Jayson Tatum, I've said it before, I think he's the most versatile player in the league in terms of how you can deploy him offensively and defensively, how you use him as he's guarding non-offensive threats at the 5. He's able to be a really strong physical rebounder. I know I've had my thoughts about Jayson Tatum's rebounding, but he is still a really good rebounder for his position, for his size. And then he's able to also be your lead initiator offensively. Now, there are outstanding circumstances that Boston have that not many other teams have that allow him to be that offensive initiator, but he's still able to do it at a really good level. But the hesitation, the cause for concern of Jayson Tatum is I can't overlook the scoring. I can't. Last postseason, it was bad on all accounts. Shooting 30% on jump shots, 32% on catch and shoot jumpers, 29% on all dribble jump shots, 23% on floaters. Like there was outside of just scoring at the rim, in which he wasn't consistently getting downhill. Well, he was consistently getting downhill, especially in the finals, but he wasn't consistently finishing at the rim, taking it up on making tough finishes, all of those things. He would make the right reads, the kickouts, the 5 out that Boston have, all of those things, but I can't overlook that level of scoring. And we might want to say small sample size. There was only 20 games in the postseason. I can understand that, but last year, 38% from mid-range. For his career, he's a below 40% mid-range shooter. The pull-up threes have always been an inconsistent thing for him. He's always around 33, 32% on pull-up threes. The catch and shoot threes have always been really good. He's always been around 40%, 41% on catch and shoot threes, but he just takes so many pull-up threes. It drags down his efficiency. It drags down his effectiveness because he's really not effective as a scorer, especially as a ball handling scorer outside of the paint. That's just not where he's not really effective, despite what the highlights or whatever you see may suggest. That's just something that's too hard for me to overlook, especially when I compare him to a playmaking dynamo like LeBron or a scoring machine like Kawhi and Kevin Durant. I just think there's too many holes in his overall offensive arsenal that aren't made up with his. I think he is the best defender of these guys. I think we're at a point where I can say he's a better defender than Kawhi Leonard. I think we're at a point where I can say he's better than Kevin Durant and clearly LeBron defensively. But that's just not enough when I think there's just too many holes offensively. I think Boston do a great job of hiding a lot of those holes. But I just think in a different situation where he didn't have the most spacing probably in NBA history, where you would see some of those flaws as a scorer, flaws as a decision maker and passer. Although he has evolved, I still think there are just holes in his game in that regard that ultimately lead me to having him in 5th. But once again, I could have seen the world where I had him at 2 because of the defense, because of the playmaking on that side of the ball, because of the catch and shoot ability, the ability to play on and off the ball, the versatility. Like I said, I could see the world in which I get him to number 2, but ultimately there was too many holes for me to have Jayson Tatum higher than I had him. So I settled on Jayson Tatum at 5, but definitely understand Jayson Tatum at number 2. But I think everyone knew this, looking at the thumbnail, looking at the landscape of the NBA. But we're going to have to ask anyway. Who do you have at number 1?
I got Aaron Gordon. Yeah, man.
Yeah. NBA champion.
Yeah, NBA champion. Should be more dunk contest champion, 2016 dunk contest champion.
Facts.
It just moves me. It moves me to where I had to put him at number 1, and he wasn't even top 11 last season. He jumped all the way to number 1. I think he's great, but I have Giannis at number 1. 30 points per game, 11 and a half rebounds, 6 assists, still a very good defender. I would say top 15 in the NBA. I wouldn't give him top 20 or top 10 to where he was a few seasons ago, but I think a lot of people, their hate with Giannis is his game is not as fun to watch for a casual fan. He doesn't really have that half-court bag, as a lot of people will say, but he's still, in my opinion, amazing in the restricted area. I think he's the most dominant player down low in the NBA, or one of the most dominant players down low. And I think his playmaking has made a significant upgrade to the point where you could say he's a positive with the ball in his hand and he can make plays for other people around him. But something that has really thrown me off this season with his fit next to Damian Lillard, I think when he sets his screen, he doesn't really look to give Damian Lillard the advantage. I think when he sets his screen, I think he's looking to score. I think he's looking to receive the pass when he gets it instead of really getting Dame open. And I think that's something that they should work on as a duo. But other than that, I think Giannis is amazing around the rim, the playmaking, the shot blocking. He's really taken a couple of steps away from his mid-range shots, which I think is a good thing. I think he was settling on those a lot more than you should, even though he wasn't much. But once again, Giannis is the best power forward in the league, and I don't think it's cooked. I don't think it's close.
Yeah, obviously Giannis number 1. They did just lose to Boston behind the Giannis 42-13-5 performance, by the way. So Giannis did his best, but ultimately couldn't overcome the Boston Celtics. The Bucks fall to, I believe, 2-8 on the season. So concerning times in Milwaukee, but they do have the best power forward in the NBA, in my opinion. I think everything you said for the most part is something that I can get behind. I said Zion may be the best rim finisher in the league. It was between him and Giannis. I don't know who I'd go. I think Zion has the better touch, but I think Giannis, just with his size and length and just his ability to create easier opportunities for himself at the rim, that puts him in that conversation. He's in the conversation with the all-time greats as rim finishers. The volume, the efficiency. Last year, 74% of the rim is just... it's really unheard of what he's been doing in the rim. I spoke about half-court scoring, but I mean, when Giannis is probably the best transition scorer in the NBA, you got to give credit where credit is due. He is a monster in transition. He is a one-man fast break, as one would say, just being able to grab and go and then go coast to coast or receive the outlet and no one's getting in front of him. And if they do, he's Euroing, he's getting around you, he's finishing. Just an absolute freight train, I guess. He's 6'11", with that agility, that fluidity, that handle, the creativity, like everything about Giannis in terms of a downhill threat is exceptional. Now, the flaws, I mean, the shooting. I mean, let's just the shooting. So we don't need to hover around it. It's the shooting. He's not he's never been, he's not going to be a good jump shooter. Now, him actually shooting less, I think is going to maximize his value. He's not settling as much. The mid-range jumper has been something he's used this season, but the three-point shot is just something he's not shooting, which is, I think, a great sign for Giannis. Understanding his game, he doesn't need to become a three-point shooter, despite what this era may say. He is going to shoot what he shoots. Prior to tonight's game, 48% on two-point jump shots. Now, is that sustainable? Probably not. But 48% is definitely something you like to see, especially when it's not an extremely high volume. So you know he's not settling for them. A couple years ago, he had the year he was at 43%, and the volumes are probably a bit too high for a Giannis Antetokounmpo because it's similar to the De'Aaron Fox situation where he's shooting more threes, but it takes away from his driving. You might be seeing that a bit with Anthony Edwards this year, where he's making the three at a ridiculous clip, but he's driving less. Like being able to find that balance between your best skill, but also improving the other areas of your game is definitely something that I think Giannis is doing a really good job of this season in terms of really going into the run and dunk man allegations, which I think there's nothing wrong with it. If you're this good, you're this imposing, you're this fast, go run and dunk. That's what you need to do. So I think Giannis being as bad of a shooter as he is, but taking less of them is improving his value. Defensively, I think the motor has been less consistent in recent years. Some of that I think is just when the personnel around you is as bad as it is. It's like he's a game-wrecking roamer. Like his ability to roam and plug up gaps is amazing. But when there's 16 gaps of possession, are we expecting him to plug up every single gap? I don't know. So I feel like the defense has regressed in terms of his overall impact, but I feel a lot of it is in part because of what he has around him. And then you've also just got some effort issues. Sometimes the offensive burden might be a bit too much, so he's not going to make that extra play that he would have in 2020, where his motor was on 100, but he was also only playing about 30 minutes a game, so you could really get the most out of Giannis in that time frame. So I think Giannis, a slight defensive aggression, but fully dialing into the driving and slashing has been great for him. Like you alluded to, the playmaking has just improved each year, the decision making, finding guys for open threes. He's one of the best kick-out passes in the NBA. He's actually improved at making like these reads for layups and dunks and stuff. When guys cut along the baseline on his drives, he's able to find them. That's extremely valuable. So like offensively, I think he's improved. Defensively, I think he's regressed from where he was a few years ago. But there's no sign of regression enough to where I would even consider him below number one. When I was making this list, it was Giannis number one. Okay, let me think. That was the instant thought process. There was no world in which I was considering him below one. I don't care about the scoring versatility. I don't care. Giannis for me was number one. It was clear as day. It was never going to change my mind. Even when I was watching the film of Kevin Durant and LeBron and Tatum, there was nothing I was like, oh, maybe they're better. No, it was Giannis number one. How high can LeBron and KD go outside of that? So for me, very comfortable having Giannis number one. Not really a question for me. Not really something I hesitated with. I think he's probably going to be number one for the foreseeable future. I don't see a world where anyone catches up to him. The guys that have a 2, 3, and 4 are all old or injury prone. Number 5, I just don't think is going to be better than Giannis, and it's going to take a lot for a guy like Paolo or Evan Mobley or whoever to come in and really take that from Giannis. Although Cooper Flagg's coming soon, so
I was just about to ask you how long you think before Cooper Flagg is top 5 on this list? How long? We can just project a little bit.
Yeah, we can talk a little bit about Cooper. Why not? We got through the list in about an hour. We can talk a little bit about Cooper. Yeah. I'm high on Cooper Flagg in the sense of, for me, he's going to be clearly the number one pick. If you don't take him number one, I think you're wrong. But I'm not as high on Cooper Flagg in terms of the typical number one guy, if that makes sense. I don't see the offensive upside that people seem to see. For me, he's a game-wrecking defender, roamer, on ball, shot blocker, defensive playmaker, the length, the athleticism, the explosiveness. Defensively, I don't see how he doesn't translate. I think he's going to come into the league. He's going to be an all-defensive caliber guy. Now, defensive player of the year is a different story because we've got these 7'4" Frenchmen running around and Chet Holmgren and Evan Mobley. So is he going to be a defensive player of the year? I don't know. But defensively, all league defensive level, not from day one, because I think his body's going to have to do some maturing. He's going to be 18 when he enters the league. But a few years down the line, all defensive caliber guy. And everything offensively, it doesn't scream role player, but it doesn't scream offensive initiator. It doesn't scream that to me. He sees the floor well, good connected passer, makes the extra reads, really good cutter, really good feel for moving off the ball, good spot up shooter. All of those things just scream playing off of someone. That's what he is. I think I'm gonna view him. I don't know why I would call him like an offensive number 2, defensive number 1 type guy. That's what I would call him. And I don't know what the ceiling of that is. I doubt he's going to be as good as Giannis ever is, but we're talking about one of the 25 best players ever, probably. So I don't think that's a knock on him, but I don't see a world in which he's going to be number 1 on this list until you got a major Giannis regression. But like even being better than a guy like Jayson Tatum, I think that's going to be extremely hard to do. So I don't know if he's going to be the best power forward in the league, but I do think he's going to be a very consistent, highly impactful player that I think you have to take number 1. I just don't see the offensive upside. But we got to remember, this is a 17-year-old. So, he's got time to develop. So I'm not going to stand on this if I see him at Duke this year and I see the upside, or I see him his first year and I'm like, oh, okay, we'll see where we are a year from now. Like, we'll see. But from now, that's what I see from Cooper Flagg. But is there anything you see from Cooper Flagg that maybe I'm missing?
I think you alluded to a lot of it. Once again, this is a guy that I look at as a defensive prospect first before an offensive prospect. I do think his handle could be a little tighter if he could just work on his turnovers in that way. I think he could make better. But once again, this is somebody who just started in college. So it's like we don't have much of a sample size, but off of what I've seen, I do like how high arcing his jump shot is. It's very hard to block. I think he's a good shooter in the mid range. But once again, with the handle, it doesn't really scream like a number 1 on a championship team type of guy. Now, defensively, I think he can anchor very good defenses just with the skills he has and his wingspan and his quickness. I think he can be very versatile. But once again, I'm trying not to jump the gun a little bit, and I'm trying to just take what I'm looking at and kind of take it with a grain of salt, because once again, he just started in college and then he was a high school player. And a lot of people, when you look at how they play in the NBA and how they played in high school, it could be very different. So I'm gonna just take my time. But I do not see a world where he slips to number 2 or number 3. He would just have to be really bad this season at the collegiate level for him to fall out of the to the number 1 spot.
He's still gonna be the youngest player in the draft. We'll see. I feel like he's gonna be the number 1 pick. We gotta remember he's 17 in college right now. He's gonna be 18 in the NBA. So yeah, I think he's gonna be the number 1 pick. I think he's gonna be great in the NBA. But we will see how his career unfolds 5 years from now. If the Hoop Talk podcast is still going on, who knows? And we do our top 10 power forwards list, maybe he'll be on it. But I want to show you guys the list we currently have compiled. So let me bring that to you guys, because I feel like this was the toughest list, I think, because there was just so many players who could have made it, and then the orders was up in the air. Me and John only agreed on 1 name, so there's a lot that was controversial about this. Make sure to leave comments on your lists down below. If you have any grievances with anything we've said, also leave a comment. I'm gonna read them. I think John reads the comments. Like the video. Even 100%. If you didn't like the video, still like the video. Just lie to YouTube. They're not gonna know. That helps the video do better on the algorithm, whatever blah blah blah. But let me get these lists to you. Let me show you guys the list that we have compiled. Here we go. These are the lists we have. I'll start with mine. I had Lauri Markkanen at 10. You can see the ranges I had put next to them. I considered Lauri Markkanen as high as 6, but that was with real optimism. And then I considered him outside the top 10, swapped with Julius Randle. I had Jaren Jackson at 9, and I never spoke about him. So Jaren Jackson, I apologize. Never spoke about you. Maybe I should talk about Jaren Jackson after we get through these lists, because I feel like he deserves to be spoken about since I had him at 9. So once we go through this, I'll actually give Jaren Jackson a little spiel because he deserves something. Paolo Banchero at 8, Zion Williamson at 7, Evan Mobley at 6, Jayson Tatum at 5, Kawhi Leonard at 4, LeBron James at 3, Kevin Durant at 2, and Giannis at number 1. John, if you want to go through your list.
At number 10, I had Evan Mobley. I projected him as high as number 7. And then Paolo, I had him as high as 6. Same with Pascal. Pascal, I think, is highest as he can be. So at number 8, I have Pascal Siakam. That is the highest he can go. I considered him for number 10. Lauri Markkanen at number 7. I had him between 6 and 8. Zion Williamson at number 6. I had him between 6 and 8 as well. Kawhi Leonard did not fall, or I did not consider him past number 5. I considered him as high as 2, but then again, from 2 to 5, I considered all of them from 2 to 5. And then number 1 was Giannis. That wasn't necessarily a debate at all.
Yeah, it really wasn't. But just to give Jaren Jackson some time, because obviously he was on my list and I never spoke about him. Jaren Jackson, for me, I think last season wasn't a representation of who he was. A, he was being used at the 5. I don't think he's a 5. And B, he was definitely being over leveraged as an on-ball creator. But I do think the reps have benefited him. I think this year you are seeing Jaren Jackson in his offensive comfort zone as a full-time power forward, offensive and defensive comfort zone as a power forward. But the offensive jump in terms of him being able to get the reps as a self-creator last year and bring that into this year where he's able to drive a closeout, he's able to give you a first and second move and get to the basket and finish at a ridiculous clip. I don't know, like, if you guys are aware, but Jaren Jackson has been extremely efficient this year. Jaren Jackson has a true shooting of 64.6% thus far this season, which is exceptional. He has also been extremely good around the basket this year, which is definitely something I like to see. He's been someone who the rim finishing and the floater range has been something that I've had concerns about. Like last year, he was 54% at the rim, whereas this year, 74% at the rim. That jump has been amazing. Back to shooting a very high clip from 3. Just the efficiency has been great. Defensively, where he's more comfortable as a roamer, having an actual defensive anchor there in Zach Edey or Jay Huff, who has been amazing this year. Shout out to Jay Huff. But being able to be in his comfort zone where he's able to just make plays on the backside, use his mobility, use his fluidity as an athlete, have really maximized, I think, Jaren Jackson's value, where last year he was in one of the worst situations for him. But this year, I think he's back in his comfort zone. He's similar to Evan Mobley in the sense of his sphere of influence as a shot blocker and just a rangy defender is like second to only like the freak aliens we have in the NBA. But the difference between him and Evan Mobley is I think Evan Mobley's the more switchable, more fluid athlete in terms of moving his feet against guards, but still an elite defender, elite shot blocker. Now, obviously, the rebounding is the elephant in the room. He's not a very good rebounder. I can definitely empathize with that. Definitely the worst rebounder on the list, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure he's Zion. One of the worst rebounders on the list. But at the 4, I don't think it's as exacerbated as it was at the 5. But overall, just the offensive maturity I've seen, the shooting ability, the ability to get to the rim and finish, the handle becoming more functional, and then defensively him being maximized again was why I had him at number 9. I just think that combination of defense and then secondary and tertiary offense is enough for me to put him over. Obviously, the guy had 11 in Julius Randle or Pascal Siakam or Draymond Green. So overall, that's why I had Jaren Jackson at 9. I do think he's really underrated. I think the more and more I watch Memphis, the more and more high I get on Jaren Jackson. So that's why I had Jaren Jackson at 9. But yeah, those were our lists. Those was our honorable mentions. Those was everything. Now, in typical Mars Talk Sports YouTube fashion, we won't be here next week. There won't be a show next week. So hey, we got 4 straight weeks, man. We got 4 straight weeks. We won't be here. We won't be here next week for the centers list. So you're gonna have to wait 2 extra weeks for the centers list. So you're gonna have to be patient on that. But we will be back to, I believe, regularly scheduled programming after that. We will be here every week, every Sunday. That is the plan. But you will have to wait an extra 2 weeks for the centers list. We do have, I'm trying to get some guests lined up. I'll get more news to you guys when I have things confirmed. I'm trying to get some guests on here. I don't have that much pull. So if you start suggesting like some big time YouTubers to come on here, I don't have that much pull. I'm sorry, I'm just a little old Mars Talk Sports. Yeah, so I don't have many connections, but I'm trying. I'm putting in the effort for you guys. Yeah, so just appreciate the effort. I'm trying, but we won't be here next week. We will be here the week after that. I am trying to get some guests lined up. Also subscribe to John's channel. John, if you want to plug your channel, like always, this is the time.
At the Buzzer Sports, you know, I do college basketball. I do prospect scouting for the NBA draft. We also do post-game analysis. Right after the games, I would post a video on just talking about some of the games that I watched. We do what ifs, we do reaction videos, everything basketball. I'm talking about it, ranking jerseys, doing tier lists, everything. And I try to be consistent Monday through Friday with uploading, and then Saturday and Sunday I kind of take off to kind of just relax for a little while. But yeah, at the Buzzer Sports, we almost there at getting monetized. So if y'all want to run over there and subscribe, you know,
you go.
Maybe a giveaway. Maybe a giveaway at 1,000 subs.
Maybe we'll see. Help John D get to 1,000 subs. His link is in the description. It is at the Buzzer Sports on YouTube. I will be on the panel tomorrow, Monday through Friday. Obviously no show next Sunday. I do have something in the works, also something else, but once I have more information, I'll give you guys all the stuff I know. But thank you guys for watching. Obviously, everyone who watched live, even during the NBA games, shout out to you guys watching during the NBA stuff. I know a lot of people would rather watch the NBA than watch this, but if you're here watching during the NBA games, really appreciate you. Shout out to everyone who watches after the fact too. Still help the channel, still do all of those things. Like the video. But I will see you guys tomorrow, and I will see you back on this channel 2 weeks from now. Thank you guys for watching. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, all of that good stuff.